Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, my name is Abdul Muntakim. I'm editor of Robotics and Automation News.com. In this interview, I speak to Ash Sharma, Senior Research Director at Interact Analysis. Interact Analysis is a market research company that produces many reports which we at Robotics and Automation News find relevant to our areas of interest and our audience. So it was very interesting to get Ash's view on a variety of subjects.
My name is Ash Sharma. I'm a Senior Research Director at Interact Analysis, and my focus is on supply chain automation, specifically around the use of robotics and automation in the supply chain and in warehouses.
And tell us a little bit about Interact Analysis. It's a research company, and does it specialize in anything? What kind of areas does it look into?
Yeah, we're a global market intelligence company. So we have offices across the world, and we focus really on the markets involved in automation of supply chain. So that could be right from the manufacturing of goods all the way through the storage and distribution in warehouses and supply chain, and then also the transportation of those finished goods.
Right. And how long have you been working for them?
So I've been involved in technology research for about 20 years now. I'm one of the co-founders of the company. We started the organization about 4 years ago, and we now have most of the major vendors in the industry are clients of ours. So we focus on everything from what you can see here, manufacturing, the warehouse automation and robotics industry. We have a strong focus on mobile robots and AMRs, and then also transportation. So that includes things like electric vehicles and autonomous trucks, etc.
Yeah, I use this. We use this particular report. I think it was this one.
Yeah.
COVID to reduce 2020 industrial robot revenue by more than 8%.
Yep.
More than 8%, on the one hand, sounds like quite a lot. On the other, given how devastating coronavirus has been, it seems like the robot industry may have got away with only 8% contraction. It might have been more, might have been worse. What's your opinion?
Yeah, there's certainly other industries that are being far more heavily impacted by the virus, and there's a few opposing trends and drivers going on here in robotics. So obviously there was naturally a shift towards automation in manufacturing and the supply chain. And although what we're seeing is that major OEMs are delaying purchasing of large capital equipment such as robotics, and automotive is obviously one of the biggest consumers of robotics, and no one is buying cars right now, and most of their plants are idle. So obviously we have a delay in spending with those companies. But on the other hand, we've got these long-term drivers, which are the need to reduce the reliance on human labor, and the need to reduce costs, and the need to allow for a more flexible manufacturing and production line. And all of those are leading to greater investment in robotics.
Yes. Is there I've been trying to figure out what productivity means. You know, when on the news, they talk about such and such country has they give a figure for productivity. And I think when when people generally talk about economic indicators, they talk about productivity. And
Mhm.
I've got this theory that productivity is directly related to automation, the level of automation. So as companies become more automated, if they're going to go into robotics more, countries, the economies, the sectors that are being more automated are going to become more productive. Is that something that, am I onto something there? And how could I
Yeah, that's
measure it?
absolutely true. I mean, if you look at the level of penetration of robots by country, you can look at the number of robots per 100,000 people, for example, in the region, and what you see is that the world's biggest producer, China, has a relatively low penetration of robots. And the government there has a very strong desire to increase productivity and to increase automation, and they are actively encouraging the uptake of robotics and automation to improve productivity in China.
Yeah, so I've got this list of top 10, which was
Mhm.
published by the International Federation of Robots, and
Yeah,
the top 10 countries with most industrial robots per 10,000 people employed in manufacturing. And the top countries are South Korea, Japan, Germany, Italy, surprisingly enough, Sweden, Denmark, US, Spain, Finland, and Taiwan. Uh, some of those countries have low populations and fewer people employed in manufacturing, so the density might be high because of that reason.
yeah.
For example, it probably is a big manufacturing nation. I'm not sure.
It
But
is, and it's worth noting that automotive is a very large part of that manufacturing in Italy, and automotive is a big consumer of robots already.
yeah, South Korea being top doesn't surprise me. South Korea, Japan,
Hmm.
Germany being very highly automated countries, their density doesn't, the robot density there doesn't surprise me. And also knowing how good they are at manufacturing,
Right.
how powerful they are in the manufacturing sector doesn't surprise me. But the other day, I saw a list of top 10 manufacturers in the world, and the UK was in the top 10. I think it was number 9.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't. It's surprising to note that actually. But what's your area of? I mean, is there particular countries that you look at? I know you mentioned China, but
Yes. I
is
mean,
there
we,
any?
we, we look at global manufacturing, so we do focus on the biggest economies in the world, and we look at it globally. And yeah, you can see there that China really is dominating.
Yeah, do you think it's going to change with COVID now? Because robots are the kind of approximately the same price everywhere, and if Western countries invest more in robotics and do a bit of reshoring that they're talking about, bringing manufacturing jobs back
Mhm.
to their own countries. Do you think a bar chart like this might change at least slightly? China at the moment, on this bar chart produced by the World Economic Forum, is at 28.4%, which is clearly way ahead. The only country that can come even close is the US at 16.6%, Japan at 7.2%, and Germany at 5.8%. The others are obviously it's respectable to be in the top 10, but they're way behind. Can coronavirus change that a little bit in the sense that if
Mhm.
some of the other countries become more highly automated, do you think they're going to do better?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we were seeing even prior to COVID-19 was some reshoring happening, particularly in the US as a result of the trade wars and the tariffs being placed on imports, which was leading to manufacturers looking to reshore. And what we're seeing is that COVID-19 is making manufacturers look more closely at their supply chains and see the risks of having great concentration of their supply in China, and potentially look at shifting at least some of that away. And then on the other hand, you've got the Chinese government, which is looking to move further up the value chain in manufacturing and try and de-emphasize the low value, low um, um, I would say low expertise and low technology manufacturing, and also reduce pollution in the country and so on. So they are naturally trying to move to more higher tech manufacturing. So what we expect is that some of that manufacturing could shift to other countries in Southeast Asia and other low cost regions. It's perfectly reasonable to assume, and I think COVID will help accelerate that as well.
Yeah, I've read stories like that. I just don't know how much of an impact it would have. I mean, that 28.4%. I don't know if it would change more than 1 or 2%, really.
No, it won't, and I can share some numbers with you after. We don't think it will change massively over the next 5 years at all, because China is, it's still a dominant force in manufacturing, and it can retain a lot of that manufacturing and production output by the government supporting the manufacturers. And what we tend to see is that companies can have relatively short memories when it comes to pandemics, well, not pandemics, but issues like the pandemic. And what they tend to be more focused on is quarter to quarter performance. And once things settle down, I'm not sure whether they will continue to shift away from China quite as aggressively.
Yeah, the other thing that, I mean, I don't know the numbers like you do. The other thing that intrigues me about China being so successful is that they're so far away, and yet they seem to manage to distribute their goods. The logistics aspect of it, the cost of logistics doesn't seem to kind of make it difficult for them. Because I keep thinking that, if you can produce goods cheaply in Europe and the US or West in general, the logistics must be cheaper because you don't have as far to travel as you do if you produce something in China and you're having to send it from China to the West. Is logistics so cheap that it's almost negligible in terms of the overall cost or the cost to the consumer or the buyer of the product? Is it so cheap? Is logistics sending things around the world, is it that cheap? What
Well,
is?
yeah, right now shipping is relatively cheap, I would say. So, delivering and moving by ship is relatively low cost. But it is a balance, that you've got to make as a manufacturer, looking at your production costs and your logistics costs and so on. And as the costs rise in China, which they have been over the last 10 years, particularly in the last few years because of labor costs increasing, it gets to a point where that balance tips, and then you think about moving the manufacturing somewhere else. But it's a lot of disruption to move production. So there has to be a very attractive alternative, I would say.
Yeah, and just to follow up on the logistics thing, if robots are increasingly used in logistics, say for example those warehouse robots that move things around within warehouses, the robotic arms that can lift things and move things, and other things like, for example, driverless trucks, driverless intralogistics vehicles that can move within an industrial sort of area, for example, from facility to facility. If there's a greater level of automation in the logistics supply chain, if you like, would that make a difference to that competitive edge that the West might have in logistics against China, or is that are the potential savings made from those things negligible in terms of competing with China? They're not negligible in terms of, obviously, within a warehouse, they're saying the figure seems to show that bringing in robots make things more efficient and more productive than using human labor. So in and of itself, warehouses do benefit from automation, but is it enough? Are those savings enough to compete with countries like China, or China specifically, really?
I mean, there's no doubt that adding robotics and automation makes these facilities more efficient and more productive, and there is certainly cost saving there. I would say when you look at the use of robots in logistics, it tends to be right now in fulfillment centers. So if you think about e-commerce fulfillment, where it's more about picking items and delivering those to the consumer. But the vast majority of those goods can still be made in China and then shipped to that warehouse in the local country. Where you could see robots being used to help compete, let's say, with China is more in the manufacturing side. So it could be automotive, electronics, pretty much anything where you can add robots to help with the manufacturing and production to improve efficiency, reduce labor costs, and to make it much more attractive to manufacture in that country versus China.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I found an article that you've written. COVID-19 will eliminate $500 million mobile robot revenues in 2020, but market predicted to nearly double in 2021. Give us a brief insight into this article that you wrote.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is looking at the use of AGVs and AMRs. So these are the automated forklifts and autonomous mobile robots that are used in both manufacturing and in logistics and warehousing. And the market there is really going through a boom in the recent years. It's been growing at a pace of more than 20% for the last 4 or 5 years at least, and is really accelerating in terms of growth. And these are being used. These mobile robots are being used in e-commerce fulfillment. So the Amazons and the competitors of Amazon, for example, where you have consumers that are expecting next day delivery or same day delivery, and they want it for free. That is causing significant pressure on these retailers. So they just simply don't have enough human workers to go and fulfill those orders. So they've been relying more on mobile robots, on AMRs to help them with that. And then on the other hand, you've also got autonomous or automated fork trucks and other vehicles that are being added to help transport material, transport goods around manufacturing facilities and around logistics centers to eliminate human labor, particularly where there is a labor shortage as well.
Yeah, I did think, I was going to ask you, you mentioned Amazon, and it's obviously a very interesting company, very successful, the largest online retailer in the world, I think, as far as I know. And I did wonder, they were very early adopters of robotics in warehouses. They bought Kiva Systems, as you know, I think in 2012 or something. That's fairly early by the standards, considering how new these machines are, these warehouse robots are. Kiva at the time was probably one of the very few companies, if not the only company, that was providing building these warehouse robots. So Amazon buying it was quite a good move, and I have wondered often whether that really helped Amazon to accelerate. It was already quite successful by then, but maybe buying robots, warehouse robots, really accelerated and provided a kind of a new platform for making their logistics that much more efficient and building even more success from there. Yeah, what do you say to that? And what do you think? Is that something that I think other people have been copying that, other retailers have been copying that template to some extent. They've been bringing in robots. As you say, it's difficult to find warehouse staff and all that. But I just feel that Amazon has been ahead of the curve. They're quite forward-looking. To seem to have been, or proved to have been, forward-looking in that respect in the adoption of their robots. What's your view of it?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So Amazon used the purchase of Kiva Systems to really accelerate their dominance in the field, and it allowed them to shorten delivery time for the consumer and to reduce the cost of fulfillment within their own operations. And that really gave them a competitive advantage. And then at the same time, they created this sort of technology vacuum where they prevented any of their competitors getting access to that technology.
Yeah.
So it was a very smart move, and as a result, we've seen dozens of companies come out with similar technology. You can see there on your page, Geek Plus is one that has a similar technology approach. There are countless others, and lots of retailers that are employing a similar approach to Amazon to help catch up with them, basically.
Yeah. What do you think of this delivery robot trend? There's quite a few companies, including Amazon. I found a story about them testing this delivery robot. Delivery robots, for the audience and new people. The difference between a delivery robot is that it goes from the shop or the facility to the customer's home or location. So in the picture there, that's a typical delivery robot. I believe it's manufactured by
Starship, I believe.
Starship, yeah. And Amazon probably have a contract with them, and they put their Amazon Prime logo on it. So they're testing. This story is about them testing it in. I don't know where. I can't remember where it is, but somewhere in America, Snohomish County, Washington. But there are quite a few delivery robot companies being testing their robots, and I don't know how successful. I'm not sure how successful they'll be, because it's quite difficult navigating sidewalks, as they call them in America, and pavements in the UK, and it's a complex route. It's not like within a warehouse. These are different from warehouse robots. They're smaller and have a lighter sort of payload and so on. But with coronavirus, changing the world, as it were, delivery robots, they're saying that they might become more accepted and adopted. What's your opinion?
Yeah, so Amazon is one of the companies you mentioned there, and Starship are also doing trials in the UK, in Milton Keynes. There's quite a few of these delivery robots for last mile delivery, and it's something that will inevitably happen. The extent of the uptake and the rollout is a little unclear right now, because there are lots of different options for this last mile delivery, whether it's click and collect or delivery via courier. There's also been talk of drone delivery and so on. So undoubtedly they will be used, and something like this COVID pandemic is likely to accelerate it. But they're still in the very early stages. There's lots of questions that need to be answered about things like safety, consumer safety, public safety, and so on. Safety of the actual vehicle, theft, vandalism, etc. So it is likely to take off, but there are still some questions there.
Yeah, well, I've found another one about the last mile. Again, for new viewers or younger viewers, last mile is when it's at a warehouse near to your house, about to be delivered to you. It's not necessarily literally a mile; it's the last leg of the journey. That usually is the most expensive, or among the most expensive parts of the journey, because the complexity of it. Obviously, everybody lives in their own place, and getting to them with each individual order is a bit tricky. So this is one solution. The delivery robots is one type of solution. This is another solution developed by Neuro. There's probably more than one company doing this, but this is a driverless vehicle of some kind. I don't know what you call this one, driverless shuttle or something.
Yeah, it's an autonomous delivery vehicle.
Yeah, so that one basically parks outside your house, and you're supposed to go and collect it from inside the vehicle. Probably you're given some sort of code number or something that opens the vehicle up, and you can collect your things from there. That's another solution for the last mile delivery thing. And yeah, these things are really interesting, but as you say, there's a lot of questions about the safety of them. Do you allow autonomous vehicles to just mingle with other types of vehicles delivering goods? Even these are designed to go on the roads, whereas the delivery robots are designed to move along the footpaths or sidewalks, and they have caused these delivery robots have caused a few problems for people. And I think one local authority in America, I think it was in San Francisco, they asked the delivery companies, robot company using delivery robots, not to use them. This is before the coronavirus pandemic, not to use them because they were probably annoying the locals a little bit too much. But now with obviously streets being empty and coronavirus locking everyone into their houses, they might be more receptive to such machinery. But yeah, we'll see. It'd be a very interesting market to follow. What are the kind of things that Interact Analysis is looking at in terms of things to watch and important technologies that might change the economy, or maybe provide solutions for the coronavirus situation that we're probably going to have for months on end now?
Yes, I mean, there's lots of industries. Pretty much every industry imaginable is being impacted by the pandemic. So we are trying to track as much of those as possible, particularly around manufacturing and so on. There is some potential for good opportunities for companies out to come out of this pandemic. So robotics is certainly one, and we're likely to see any companies involved around e-commerce as well, any kind of automation around e-commerce likely to be very successful. So we saw Ocado recently announce some additional fundraising to try and expand into the e-commerce automation for groceries.
Yeah, grocery e-commerce is interesting because it necessitates very fast supply chains because of the nature of the goods being fresh and probably going to go off within literally hours if they're not stored properly and so on. So that probably will demand a lot more automation and all that going forward. And software, we don't really cover a lot of software uh, because we like to talk about machines that move and you can see them move. Software obviously just lives inside computers and all that, but there's a lot of software innovation and advancement going on. Do you cover things like that? I mean, there's something called digital supply chain, which I suppose means lots of software for the supply chain, and probably yeah, there's loads of things in manufacturing as well, digital twins and
Hmm.
a virtual, I don't know, all sorts of things. Do you cover software and that kind of
We do,
digitization,
yeah,
as
we
they
do to
call
some
it?
extent, absolutely, because software is critical in all of these automation markets. The hardware is just one piece, but the software is what really brings the value and the optimization.
Yeah, I tend not to cover it as much, mainly because it's difficult to find pictures for software. You know, you can
Yeah.
give a screenshot for the interface, but beyond that, there's not much you can do. So it's just more fun to put pictures of cars and robots on the website. And also, I get the feeling that developing and building hardware, especially hardware that moves, is mobile, is autonomous, is far more challenging and complex than developing software. Maybe people developing software feel offended by that, but it
Mm.
is ultimately it's lots of code, and yes, you do have to test it, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but to actually build something real, three-dimensional, physical in the real world and have it operate in the way that's required, regulated in a safe and productive way, I imagine it's a bit more challenging and difficult. I don't know what you think.
I mean, I think they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, and I think they both need to function and perform to create a system that works. I mean, you could argue that the hardware tends to be more standardized, the same components, the same sensors, whereas the software is often created bespoke and developed to provide the USP for the hardware.
We published an article recently about how there's so many companies now developing driverless cars,
Mm-hmm.
including companies you never would have thought would be interested in building cars. Amazon recently bought a company that develops driverless cars, so it's become clear that they're interested in it. Apple are rumored to be interested in it. I'm not sure what the latest situation is. Google definitely is. They've got their own little driverless car unit. I don't think Facebook is so much. There's probably one other tech company that I've forgotten about. I mean, obviously you got people like Uber saying they're going to have driverless vehicles available soon, and so on and so forth. There's all these what you might call tech companies, meaning computer tech companies, who are developing driverless cars on the one side, but they're coming from a software point of view. They're used to mainly being software companies. They do a little bit of hardware, especially in the case of Apple, obviously very successful in the hardware, but the others are mainly software oriented, I would argue. And then on the other side, you got, I would think, probably Germany, the great German car manufacturers like BMW, Mercedes, and Audi and Volkswagen and all those brands that yeah, they're developing autonomous functions, but they're not. They don't seem to talk about fully driverless as much. They're looking into it and they're testing it, but they've been building autonomous functions for years under the umbrella term of automated advanced driver
Yeah.
assistance systems, ADAS. So they're in a way, if like to simplify things, they're approaching, each side is approaching it from their own strength, point of strength, if you like. The
Mhm.
tech companies from a software point of view, and the car makers, the traditional car makers, from a hardware point of view. And there seems to be a race developing to see who can build a driverless car that can then be regulated and permitted to operate on the roads. I don't think it's as clear cut as I'm trying to make it, but it's a very interesting scenario that's developing to observe. And I don't know how long it will take for driverless cars to be allowed onto the roads and be operated, and which side or which approach or which company will win, if you like, if I can put it in crude terms. What's your overview of all that activity and business and things?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. All the tech companies are getting into or looking at getting into the automotive industry, because if you think about it, after housing, buying a car is your biggest capital expense. So it's the biggest um, amount of money that you're going to spend on anything, and it's also somewhere where you spend a lot of time and has increasing amount of technology included in there. So the electronics, the silicon content of a vehicle is huge now. So most of the traditional vehicle manufacturers have always been focused on the design of the car, the performance, the engine performance, and so on. And the tech companies are obviously more looking at the technology, the autonomous driving, and so on, because really that is completely software based and simulation based. So most cars can use the same lidar sensors and cameras and so on, but it's really the software that helps those sensors or takes the information from the sensors and helps the car understand what is actually happening and what it should do. So that is really complete software play for autonomous driving.
Mm. Yeah, it's a really interesting time for that particular market, and as it is, to be honest, about for all sorts of robotics and automation markets, warehouse robots. Yeah, they're very new, even though they're very widely used and almost established by now. They're actually very new. I just yesterday discovered the autonomous mobile robots, the ones that work in warehouses. I don't think they're specifically regulated. They're not named in regulations and standards by the ISO or similar organizations. The regulations that I suppose machine builders use are kind of related. They're not that those regulations don't actually mention autonomous mobile robots. It'd be interesting to see how that one plays out. But
There
yeah.
have been some safety standards that have been worked on for years now. I think they still haven't been released yet. So yeah, ultimately they will need some safety standards, because there's already tens of thousands of these robots out there. There's going to be hundreds of thousands very soon.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's so many of them already out there that you would have thought there'd be standards already. Excuse me. All right. Okay. Well, it's a really interesting interview. One last thing, I suppose. How do you see your own development, the Interact Analysis's development going forward as a company, as well as as a business? There's lots of big market and analysts out there. I do find that your articles and the subjects you pick up on are very interesting for us. We could end up using so much material from your website. You pick really interesting subjects, but obviously we don't want to become Interact Analysis, an Interact Analysis clone website. But yeah, you definitely produce a lot of very interesting reports. But in terms of as a business, how are you going to approach things, and what do you think are the prospects for growth?
Yeah. I mean, we have been amazed by the reception we've had from customers since we founded the company. 4 years ago. So they have been very impressed with what we're doing, and we've seen incredible growth over the last few years, and we are continuing to grow even throughout COVID-19. We are expanding. Revenues are growing very, very rapidly, and we are expanding the teams and expanding our offerings. And what we're seeing is that, yes, there are lots of big research companies out there that are, I guess, moving in an opposite direction to us. We're focusing more on real intelligence on industries, real expertise on the industry, and very, very close interaction with our clients to actually provide them with information they need, rather than just a set of data tables, which doesn't really mean a lot to them.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ash, for your time and your insights.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, we have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.